Grade 11, these are the answers for your revision sheet. So first question, the process of maintaining a steady body temperature is, of course, as we said, it's thermoregulation. Thermoregulation is performed through homeostasis that is responsible for maintaining the internal conditions of the body constant at all time. Thermo means temperature and regulation means adjustment. So thermoregulation is the process of maintaining a steady body temperature. Number 2, when we look at the figure here, it's going to show us the one type of cell that is coming from the zygote, and this type of cell is performing different functions. We said that in the zygote we have only one type of cell that starts from the stem cell, and then these cells, they start taking different functions. So they all start with one cell, which is the stem cell, and then they go through a process called determination, in which each cell is given a certain job, and then they go through another process which is called differentiation, in which each cell starts looking at as the job requires. So for example, the sperm cells, they start having a tail. The bone cells, they start having a calcium inside them, which makes them harder. The epithelial cells, they start being arranged in a certain manner. So what is the process that we see here in this diagram? It is how the cells are going to go to different stages, which are called cell differentiation. First of all, we have cell determination. Each cell is given a certain function, and then when cells are differentiated, they start looking differently in order to perform these functions. Number 3, what is the simplest level of organization in the body? Of course, it is the cell. Number 4, which of the following carries messages to parts of the body? The hormones. We said the hormones are chemical messages that are taken to different parts of the body according to the specific message. Number 5, when organ systems work together, they form another level of organization, which is called the organism. Which type of cell goes through the determination process? We said that the first cell is the stem cell. The stem cells are given functions. When they are given functions, this is called determination. When they start changing their shape in order to perform these functions, it is called cell differentiation. Number 7, which arrows in figure 28.2 show a return to normal conditions after a negative feedback loop has been activated? So we're going to look at this figure, and we're going to see the different steps that are taken in order to maintain a certain order that is done by homeostasis. Okay, so here in number 7, we look at the messages that are taken from one point to another. There is a message that goes to the control center. Then the control center sends the message to the target. Then the target responds. All of this is going to return always to the set point. So which one is going to show a return to normal conditions after a negative feedback loop has been activated? It is from target response to the set point. This is when this negative feedback is going to stop, because we reached a set point. Number 8, the lungs are composed of 4 types of tissue. Which phrase best describes the lungs? An organ, of course, because it's formed of more than one type of tissue. Which part of a negative feedback loop detects changing conditions? B, the sensor. The sensor is responsible for recording a certain changing condition, and then it starts sending the message. Number 10, you inhale and hold your breath. The negative feedback loop that controls breathing keeps you from holding your breath too long. What is the final step in this loop? Again, the muscles of the diaphragm relax and then contract again, because when they relax, they are going to let you push the air to the inside of the lungs. 11, several organs must work together to produce vitamin D. If one organ is not working well, the body makes less of this vitamin. Which organ systems suffer most from the lack of vitamin D? the skeletal system. Vitamin D is responsible for the deposition of calcium on your bones, and it's responsible for keeping your bones healthy. So the first system that's going to be affected is the skeletal system. Number 12. The body works to maintain homeostasis in response to what conditions? Internal and external changes. Your body temperature, if there is heat on the outside, this is an external change. Your body temperature needs to be kept constant. If you have a fever, this is an internal change. Still, your body temperature needs to be kept constant. 13. On a hot day, which of the following is an outward sign that thermoregulation is taking place? Of course, sweating. When you start sweating, this means that your body is maintaining the internal temperature constant. 14. How does the liver help to regulate glucose levels in the blood? Of course, by storing glucose. The liver stores glucose, and then when the body needs it, it is going to release it. And when your body is making extra glucose, the liver is going to store the extra levels of glucose. Number 15. During childbirth, a woman's body produces oxytocin, which causes the uterus to contract. To maintain the contractions, more oxytocin is produced until the baby is born. This is an example of a positive feedback. When there is more produced, this is a positive feedback. When there is less produced in order to keep the conditions constant, it is a negative feedback. 16. Through the process of thermoregulation, the body maintains a stable, of course, internal temperature, C. 17. What do the different shapes of cells shown in figure 28.1 reflect? Again, we're going to look at this. It starts with the zygote, which contains the stem cells, and then each one of the cells is going to take a specific function. So for this one, they have different functions. Okay, the zygote is giving cells. Each one is developing a certain shape in order to perform a certain function. 18. Why must organ systems interact as a community? Each organ alone cannot perform, of course, all the functions required. So the answer is D, because each organ alone cannot perform all the necessary tasks. You can't just have a heart, or have a lung, or have a digestive system. They all need to communicate together in order to reach the point of all of your body is working properly. 19. Information from the body sensors. They go first where? From the body sensor, it has to go to the control center, because the control center is going to compare it and then decide if what this change require in order to maintain homeostasis. Number 20. Which type of tissue lines the stomach and the lung? D. Epithelial tissue. Epithelial tissue is the lining tissue, wherever it is. 21. Which of the following statements describes how you would classify figure 28.2 as a negative feedback loop? Let's look at this, and we're going, why did we say that this is a negative feedback loop? Okay, here when we look at the figure, there is a set point, and then there is a message that goes from the set point in order to return to the set point. So the set point says that there is an increase noted by the sensors. The message is sent to the control centers. The control center is going to send a message to the target, and then we need to return to the set point. Returning to the set point means that this is a negative feedback. So the answer is B. The control center counteract change from a set point. 22. Which of the following phrases describes an organ? C. Different tissues working together. Of course, as you learned it since grade 5. 23. What happens to the cells during determination? They lose the potential to develop into a type of cell. So, during determination, they are going to instead of just being a cell that can be any other cell, they lose this potential and now they are going to become other cells. So they are not going to just be potential cells, they are going to have a certain function given to them. So 23b. 24. The development of a whip-like tail on a sperm cell during differentiation is the result of specific gene turning on and off in a pattern. So how did the sperm cell get a tail? Because the sperm cell first, during determination, it was given a job, and then after these these cells were given a job, they are given the job of reproducing new types of cells. Then as for the sperms, they are going to develop the whip-like tails. They are going that enable them to swim. Why? Because they are not going to become just a regular cell anymore. They are becoming sperm cells. So the sperm cells, they are going to have specific genes until they turn into these specific cells which having a whip-like tail. 25. Homeostasis regulates the internal environment by maintaining conditions within narrow ranges. Your body temperature should be kept in a certain range. Any increase or decrease from this range is going to stimulate the process of homeostasis and thermoregulation. 26. When cells do not continue to develop into specialized cells, they undergo cell death, which is called apoptosis. B. 27. How does a positive feedback loop respond to changing conditions? It increases a change from a set point. In a negative feedback loop, we need to decrease the change. In the positive feedback loop, as we call it, it becomes worse. So it goes on and on and on. It increases the change from the set point. 28. When you hold your breath, sensors in the blood vessels detect lower oxygen levels. The brain stem receives the information and sends messages through the nervous and endocrine systems to the muscles of the diaphragm, forcing you to breathe. Which part of this feedback loop would be considered to be the control center? Of course, it is the brain stem, because it is going to be the brain stem. They said the sensors in the blood vessels, they are going to detect the lower oxygen levels, and the brain cell is going to receive the information. So the brain cell in this case, stem in this case, is the control center. 29. Which of the following is an example of sensors working during homeostasis? Of course, during homeostasis, the energy demands triggering a release of glucose. Which of the following is an example of sensors working during homeostasis? You need more energy because, for example, you're running, so you're going to need the glucose that is released from the burning up of your food. Okay, so in this case, the answer is D, 29D. Number 30. What two organ systems provide communication in thermoregulation? Of course, it is the nervous and the endocrine system. One is going to feel the increase in temperature, and the other is going to make you sweat in order to regulate your body temperature. 31. What type of stimulus does a thermoreceptor detect? Of course, a thermoreceptor that is responsible for regulating the body temperature is going to detect the temperature. 31A. 32. What structure on a neighboring neuron with the axon terminal shown in this diagram connect? So we're going to look here at this diagram and look at the neighboring neuron with the axon terminal. This is the axon terminal, okay? And we look for what structure or on a neighboring neuron, okay? So each one of the axon terminals, they connect with the dendrites of the coming neuron. So the axon terminals of one neuron, they communicate with the dendrites of the following neuron. 33. Which type of neuron transmits information within the brain and the spinal cord? They are called interneurons. They are responsible for transmitting the information within the brain and the spinal cord. 34. A hormone may encounter a cell but not bind to it or affect its activities if the hormone doesn't match the cell receptor. Let's remember that the hormones, they circulate in your body, but they only go to specific type of cell. So for example, a thyroid hormone is going to target a certain cell. The pituitary releases hormone that are targeting, for example, the ovaries, they only get to the ovaries. Although they pass all around your body, they are only read and they are taken by the ovaries. So if it doesn't match the cell's receptor, it's not going to affect the cell. 35. Which is the reason why reflex arcs can produce responses so quickly? Because the signals do not need to travel to the brain. One of the very important reflex arcs is when you pull your hand away from a hot thing. Okay, it doesn't require the signal to be sent to the brain. It is stored within the neurons in your hands, so you don't need a long time in order to pull your hand away. 36. An action potential occurs when there is a change in sodium and potassium ion distribution. The sodium and the potassium are responsible for the action potential that occurs in your neurons. Number 37. What happens when hair cells in the inner ear bend? Okay, so the hair cells that are present in the inner ear are responsible for carrying the impulse to your brain. The inner ear is the last point that the sound reaches before being transmitted to your brain and being read by your brain. 38. When brain cells undergo desensitization, the neuron decreases the amount of receptors on its surface. Desensitization means that the brain is not that sensitive to a certain stimulus anymore. For example, a person that's working in the heat day and night, they do not feel the same effect of a hot thing on their hands as you do. This is called desensitization. So the answer in 38 is B. 39. Which is an example of how the nervous system and the endocrine system work together? The hypothalamus receives action potentials and releases hormone. Hypothalamus, nervous system. Hormones, endocrine system. This means that both of them are working together. Number 40. Why might a doctor scan the pituitary gland if a patient has low levels of hormone that produced in the adrenal gland? We said that the pituitary gland is present in the brain, while the adrenal glands are present in over your kidneys. So why would the doctor scan the pituitary gland? Because the pituitary gland is responsible for making a hormone that makes the adrenal gland function. So the pituitary gland produces releasing hormone that stimulate the adrenal glands. So a person may have a problem in their adrenal gland, but at the same time the doctor requires the scanning of the pituitary gland. We're going to stop here and we're going to continue solving the question starting number 41 next video.